I am Homo sapiens. The Carboniferous period, spanning from 359 to 299 million years ago, was a time in Earth's history marked by significant changes in both plant and animal life. During this period, shifts in Earth's climate not only influenced the development and spread of plants on land, but also deeply affected the lifestyle and ecosystems of various animals. In this video, we will explore how the climate of the Carboniferous period impacted plants and how animals were affected by it. In this video, we will understand the Carboniferous period in 4 parts. 1. The formation of the supercontinent Pangaea. 2. The climate and weather. 3. Plants and the plant kingdom. 4. The animals of the Carboniferous period. The formation of the supercontinent Pangaea. During the Carboniferous period, the movement of tectonic plates was slow, but its impact was still significant. This period was primarily marked by the collision and merging of 2 large continents, Gondwana and Laurasia. This process led to the formation of a massive supercontinent known as Pangaea, which in turn brought about changes in climate and weather. The climate and weather. The Carboniferous period can be divided into 2 phases in terms of climate: the early Carboniferous and the late Carboniferous. The early Carboniferous began with a tropical climate characterized by high humidity and warmth. Heavy rainfall occurred throughout the year, fostering the growth of swampy forests and plants like giant ferns, horsetails, and lycopods. As a result, vast swampy forests and submerged areas spread across the equatorial regions during this time. The levels of carbon dioxide during this period were so high that, despite the extensive presence of forests, the Earth's average temperature was much higher than it is today. Additionally, the decay and decomposition of swampy forests and plants increased the levels of carbon and methane in the atmosphere. Consequently, at the beginning of this period, the Earth's average temperature ranged from 20 to 25 degrees Celsius, which is significantly higher than today. However, after the mid-Carboniferous, this temperature began to steadily decline, with the global average dropping to 10 to 15 degrees Celsius. By the end of the period, ice sheets covered the Earth's southern hemisphere. Thus, the global temperature gradually decreased throughout the period. Towards the mid and late Carboniferous, the Earth began transitioning to a colder and drier climate, ultimately leading to glaciation or an ice age. In addition to carbon dioxide, the level of oxygen in the atmosphere was also exceptionally high, reaching around 35%, compared to only 21% today. This high oxygen level made respiration easier for animals and contributed to the increase in size of some animals, particularly insects. Plants and the plant kingdom. The Archaeopteros forests of the Devonian period became extinct at the beginning of the Carboniferous period due to environmental changes caused by the formation of Pangaea. Cyanobacterious thread-like structures, known as angel hair, thrived and took over most of the muddy areas, much like they did in earlier times. Land plants, which had provided shade for tetrapods even after the extinctions at the end of the Devonian, were themselves similar to the tetrapods of this time, smaller and weaker compared to their ancestors. It took time for forests to recover, but when they did, they transformed into some of the most powerful rainforests the world has ever seen. Unlike most modern trees that grow slowly and live for decades, even centuries, each tree of that era stood on its sturdy wooden trunk throughout its lifetime, producing seeds multiple times. The canopy of leaves in these rainforests cast shadows over most of the land below, creating a completely different ecosystem. This ecosystem supported countless small plants, shrubs, and various other living creatures, including insects. However, the early Carboniferous lycopod forests were different. The early Carboniferous lycopod forests were not like modern forests. All lycopods, like their Devonian ancestors, were hollow and made of heartwood rather than thick bark. In the mid-Carboniferous period, Earth saw the dominance of 20-meter-long horsetails like calamites and lycopod club mosses like lepidodendron. These could grow as tall as 50 meters and spread across a sky that was not blue, but brown, filled with the smell of burning. Due to the high oxygen content in the atmosphere, lightning could easily start fires in many places. Many types of ferns also developed in large numbers during this period. These ferns had large fronds and reproduced through spores rather than seeds. Compared to today's ferns, these ferns were much larger in size. The extraordinary growth of plants and forests during the mid-Carboniferous covered the Earth's surface entirely with vegetation. This period is known for the diversity of flora and the complexity of plant development. The Carboniferous forests also had a profound impact on Earth's carbon cycle. These massive forests absorbed large amounts of carbon dioxide from the air and stored it within themselves, which later became buried in swamps and turned into coal. This is why the period is called the Carboniferous, which literally means coal-bearing. Much of the coal we mine today is derived from the remnants of plants from this period. In the late Carboniferous and towards its end, as glaciation began and dryness increased on Earth, seed-bearing plants experienced a resurgence. As I mentioned earlier, the seed-bearing Archaeopteros plants from the Devonian period had become extinct by this time. However, to survive in cold and dry climates, plants began to redevelop seeds. The seed-bearing plants of this period, known as gymnosperms, such as conifers, developed and spread prominently. The development of seeds helped plants reduce their dependency on water, allowing them to survive and expand in dry conditions. Additionally, another type of tree, called cordytes, emerged. These were large gymnosperms with long, narrow leaves and seed-bearing cones. By the end of this period, with climate change, there was a decrease in plant diversity. While the early period had vast swampy forests with widespread plant growth, only a few species could survive the colder and drier conditions. Animals of the Carboniferous period. At the end of the Devonian period, a mass extinction event wiped out the corals and sponges that formed large reef structures in the oceans. All hard-shelled placoderm fish went extinct, along with most lobe-finned fish and nearly all trilobites. This event also affected early tetrapods, which were significantly impacted. The tetrapods that survived this extinction stayed near or possibly in the water. The animals of this period can be discussed in 4 categories. 1. Insects. 2. Early tetrapods. 3. Amphibians. 4. Reptiles. Insects. The Carboniferous period was a significant time for the evolution of insects. This was when both the diversity and size of insects increased dramatically. The first flying insect species also evolved during this period. The development of insects was driven by the presence of tropical forests, which provided abundant food and favorable conditions. Meganeura. Meganeura was one of the most famous insects of the Carboniferous period. It was a species of dragonfly with a wingspan that could reach up to 70 centimeters. This insect was a skilled predator, hunting small insects and other tiny creatures due to its large eyes and swift flight. Arthropleura armata. Arthropleura armata was a giant millipede that could grow up to 2.5 meters, 8 feet, long. It lived in the dense forests of the Carboniferous period and fed on dead plant matter. This insect was an important detritivore, meaning it decomposed dead plant material and helped enrich the soil. Carboniferous cockroaches. Cockroach species were also widespread during this time. However, compared to modern cockroaches, they were larger and more diverse. These cockroaches primarily fed on fallen leaves and plant material on the forest floor. Some other insects from this period include Paleodictyoptera, Paeolida, Paralogidae, Protophasma, and Proto-Orthoptera. Early Carboniferous tetrapods. At the very beginning of the Carboniferous period, a meter-long salamander-like creature called Poderpes made an attempt to live out of water. Unlike earlier tetrapods like Acanthostiga and Ichthyostiga, Poderpes established a pattern that continues today, having 5 digits on each of its 4 limbs. For the first time, a creature was found to have 5 digits on all 4 limbs. However, its fossil remains suggest that it also retained a vestigial fin structure, which was a remnant limb. Poderpes breathed through lungs and was a strong tetrapod with a robust skeleton and bones capable of bearing its weight and allowing it to walk on land. It lived on the edges of floodplains that were often submerged. Crassocerinus was another meter-long predator from this period, resembling a moray eel, with large jaws filled with small teeth. This dangerous predator roamed the early Carboniferous rivers and ponds. Amphibians. Amphibians were the dominant animals that evolved during the Carboniferous period. These amphibians began adapting to life on land. However, they still relied on water for some parts of their life cycle, especially for reproduction. Amphibians breathe through their skin, requiring a moist environment. Ichthyostega. Ichthyostega was an early amphibian considered a transitional form between fish and amphibians. It had a large body and strong limbs that enabled it to walk on land. However, its skin and reproductive system were still dependent on water, which meant it primarily lived around shallow water bodies. Dendropteron. Dendropteron was an amphibian adapted to both aquatic and terrestrial life. It had strong legs, allowing it to move well outside of water. It was mostly found in tropical forests, where it hunted small insects and other tiny creatures. Reptiles. In the later part of the Carboniferous period, reptiles began to evolve. There is some debate among scientists about whether they evolved directly from amphibians. However, reptiles were better adapted to terrestrial life. The most significant adaptation of reptiles was their egg-laying system, known as the amniotic egg. This egg could develop on land without the need for water, giving reptiles greater independence in terrestrial environments. Essentially, the main evolutionary difference between amphibians and reptiles is that reptiles lay hard-shelled eggs on land, while amphibians must return to water to reproduce, laying delicate, shell-less eggs. Hylonomus. Hylonomus, considered the earliest reptile, evolved in the later part of the Carboniferous period. It was a small, lizard-like creature about 20 centimeters long. With strong legs, it could move well on land. Hylonomus hunted small insects and eggs and was found in the forests of the Carboniferous. Paleothyrus. Paleothyrus was another early reptile that existed around 300 million years ago, towards the end of the Carboniferous period. It was a small, slender, and flexible creature, measuring 30 to 40 centimeters in length, with large eyes that helped it see in low light or at night. Paleothyrus is related to pelycosaurs, one of the earliest branches of synapsids. It primarily hunted small insects and other invertebrates. During the Carboniferous period, there was a complex and balanced relationship among insects, amphibians, and reptiles. Insects played a crucial role in maintaining the health of plants, with species like Arthropleura breaking down dead plant matter, enriching the soil, and making nutrients available for plants. Eventually, insects became essential for pollination. Insects were a primary food source for amphibians and reptiles during the Carboniferous period, a relationship that continues today. Many species of amphibians and reptiles, and their modern descendants like birds, still rely on insects as a food source, as the availability of insects has remained consistent. During this period, amphibians acted as intermediate predators in both aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems, preying on insects and small animals, thus helping control the populations of these species. Reptiles, on the other hand, were the top predators of this era, hunting amphibians, insects, and smaller reptiles. The increasing diversity of reptiles prompted other species to develop new survival strategies, leading to the evolution of various forms of life. By the end of the Carboniferous period, climate changes and glaciation led to significant environmental shifts, including the collapse of tropical forests and major changes in ecosystems. Many species of insects, amphibians, and reptiles became extinct, but those that survived adapted to the new ecosystems and climates.